Common Knowledge is brought to you by our friends at Game Grid Midvale, our local game store who puts players first with weekly competitive events, below market pricing, and the best customer service available. Check out their online inventory using the link in our description.
We are also sponsored by inkgaming.com. Use coupon code CCMTG10 at checkout for a 10% discount on all inked gaming supplies and accessories. You can support the show directly through Patreon at patreon.com/common knowledge.
This is the Common Knowledge Podcast. It's not about the cost, it's about the knowledge. Here are your hosts, Brandon Clark and Lawbert.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to episode 86 of the Common Knowledge Podcast. I am your host, Brandon, and joined with me on the line is Sean the Lawbert.
What is up, my Brandon?
Not a lot, my Lawbert.
You have an okay week?
Yeah, it was a good week. It was a busy week, but it was a good week. Oh, we did a lot of things at the restaurant this week. Halloween was, super busy. Then on Friday, there was a big party at the restaurant during our lunch hours. It was a lot of people. I think it was like over 40 people. So that was that. And then last night, we had a party of 70 that was doing an event, the Ogden Wine League. And so they do an event, and our chef creates a special menu for them that they can pair with their wines. You know, they'll like, okay, our next course, the chef has prepared this thing for us, and we're going to be pairing it with this wine. And then we bring the course out, and they drink their wine and eat their course, and then we get the next course, send it out, etc.
This is insanely fancy.
It was fun. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun. So yeah, it's just been like really long hours, lots of craziness, chaos.
I had to put in some long hours to finish this 5-card blind tournament.
Yeah, you did.
It took way longer than I thought it would. I thought it would be like, spend an hour, maybe 2 to figure this all out. And it was like 4 or 5, just because like having everybody play against everybody and make sure that I have all the numbers right and I'm not missing what any cards do. Like there was one card, it was Coercion, which I had in my head did something slightly different, and I had to go back. It was only after like 4 or 5 matches, and I just went back and did all of them, and I think the results were exactly the same. But some of these took a long time by themselves just to figure out, like, okay, they go first, and then there's like 4 or 5 possibilities of how the round could go, and I had to figure out if any of them led to victory, or a lot of them just led to like forced draws or all-out defeat. But if you're not aware of what 5-card blind is or what we're talking about, we did a giveaway tournament thing where people sent in lists of, it's just 5-card decks. All of the cards start in your opening hand. You don't lose for running out of cards. And we just match them all up into pods of 8 and do a tournament with them, and we play the decks against each other.
Yeah, and it was really cool, and we were really excited. We had a lot of participation, and a lot of really fun decks came through, and that's what our whole episode is actually going to be today. We're going to start off with our card of the week, and then we're just going to talk about this tournament. We're going to cover all the deck lists, so everyone's going to get their moment in the sun who submitted a deck list to us, because they're all super sweet. Disclaimer, we might have messed up on the rules, and
I did. It was not. I'll say it's not an accident, but the repercussions for it were worse than I thought they would be, because there was a card that I didn't consider. Actually, 2. But let's get into card of the week, and then we'll get into that later.
Card of the week.
Okay, so our card of the week this week is Palace Sentinels. 3 and a white for a 2/4 human soldier. When Palace Sentinels enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. And for anyone who doesn't know what that means, it means that you get a little token that says at the end of your turn, beginning of your end step, draw a card. And you do that until someone deals you combat damage with one of their creatures, and they become the monarch, and they get to draw the card.
Yeah, so this was one of those cards that we were like, I was kind of like, how haven't we done this before? This was one of the most important cards in the meta pre-Astrolabe, and we're doing it now because it's seeing a resurgence, kind of like you would expect when the thing that pushed it out is banned. The strategy with this, it's both Boros Bully and Boros Monarch. You play a bunch of removal spells and some flying creatures that can block for you. Like Battle Screech is exceptional at this. Just puts a bunch of blockers out, and even if you lose all of them that turn, but you block 4 creatures, you're going to draw a card at the beginning of your next end step. So it's very, very worth it. It becomes justifiable to lose just about anything because you have an infinite source of card advantage.
Yeah, like Sean said, this card was pushed out just because losing the Monarch, I think, was too big of a liability, and Ephemerate plus anything was just a much better source of card advantage. And so there's really just like no point in having this clunky 4-mana spell that had potential downside.
But now that it's back, I did kind of want to examine why Palace Sentinels is the premier Monarch card and not Thorn of the Black Rose or Emissary of Trust. I think the other two still haven't had Magic Online printings, but I think that they're not going to be as good as this either. Do you have any opinions on that before I give mine?
I think a lot of it has to do with the color's ability to protect the Monarch. Like, white has access to, like you said, cards like Battle Screech, Core Skyfisher, really efficient ways to gum up the board and block, as well as Prismatic Strands.
Yeah, you said exactly what I was going to say. Of just those other colors don't have flyers. I think the long and the short of it is you gotta block when you play this. White has good flyers, and black has good removal spells, but these white decks just splash red and then have cheaper removal spells. And I just don't think that's one of the reasons I don't think we're ever gonna see like Emissary of Trust see a whole lot of play. Like, yeah, it's gonna see some land destruction play, but not in the way that Palace Sentinels is going to be in tier 1 decks.
All right, so that was the card of the week, Palace Sentinels. You ready to just jump into the main topic?
Yeah.
All right, cue the deep voice.
Main topic.
Thanks, deep voice. All right, we're going to talk 5-card blind. We're going to talk all about this tournament because it was super fun, and we're super excited about it, and we hope that listeners are excited about it, and I think a lot of people were. We had some good participation, like I said. We had 3 pods, 2 pods of 8 and 1 pod of 9, right?
Yeah.
And this was round robin within the pod, and then we took the top 8.
Top 2 from each pod, and then the remaining 2 slots were the highest point totals within the previous pod. So if you had a good deck, but you were just pushed out in your pod, still got a lot of points, you still made it in. And a couple of things. One, we've never done a podcast on this, so the formatting might be weird. We're going to try to figure it out. But then also, part of the fun of these tournaments is whenever you do a tournament, people will look at the results. You can look at the past tournaments, see what was good, and gear against them. Also, bannings and rule changes are really important in these because like we're going to see, there was a problematic card. The rule that I did not copy over from like the default rules that I found online was that you can't force your opponent to discard more than 1 card with a single card before turn 3. One of the reasons I left it out is because it was the wordiest and clunkiest of the rules, and I really wanted to just see how it went. I didn't think that there would be... The problem card was Burning Inquiry. Burning Inquiry was each player draws 3 cards and then discards 3 cards at random. What would happen is people would like ritual up a bunch of mana, play out their hand, have an extra mana, and Burning Inquiry, make your opponent discard down to 2 cards. And there's very few decks that can actually still function on 2 cards. You've got to beat the threat that they just put on the board and do it with 1 card. There is a deck that does it, and it was my favorite deck of the bunch. But I think in the future, we're probably going to ban that.
So, little disclaimer here. I know that we had these results posted up. By the time you guys hear this, it'll probably be a couple weeks that you would have seen the original results that we posted. But it was made known to us that we had actually made a really big error in the standings. Normally, I think originally we weren't going to bother with things like that if there was some sort of error that, we were just going to say sorry. But this was big enough and it like had a huge effect on the outcome of the entire tournament. So we went back and Sean ran through all the numbers again and all the games to make sure that we had gotten everything right. We straightened it out. So we just want to say, we're sorry to those who believed that they had won, because they didn't. The error that we had made cost someone else winning the tournament, and we felt that it was better to give that person that notoriety, I guess. Not notoriety. I don't know. They worked really hard on a really awesome deck list, and we wanted to make sure that that wasn't lost on an error on our part. So sorry for the confusion, and especially sorry to the people who believed that they had won or placed higher and now are not, because things did get kind of skewed. But we just wanted to make sure the people that worked really hard and came up with the best deck lists were the people who are going to be rewarded. So
yeah, and we did originally say that we were going to announce the winners on the show. So we caught it before we released the show. Parts of this are going to be edited in between 2 days because we recorded it, found the error, and then we decided that we were going to re-record parts of it. So if anything sounds a little bit different, that's what it is. And I'm going to go into detail more about the error once we get through all the deck lists and get to that top 8.
Yeah. So, if you guys were curious why all of a sudden our clothes are different, that's because we're recording this on Thursday, and we had originally recorded the episode last Sunday. We're sorry about that, but I guess also try to be a little understanding too. Sean worked really hard on this tournament. It was a ton of work. I helped where I could when Sean had questions, and me and him kind of tried to bang things out, but mostly this was Sean. And so, yeah, we made a mistake, but there was a lot of information and a lot of stuff to try and get through. So
all your entry fees are refunded.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So Pod 1. The first deck list is brought by Venio et Vinco, or E.T. Vinco.
I think you got it right the first time. Yep, that's right.
All right. Yeah, and we're going with your Magic Online screen names because that's what was submitted to us. So Vinio's deck list: Swamp, Dark Ritual, Coercion, Orzhov Basilica, Sanitarium, Skeleton.
So the point of this one is Dark Ritual into Coercion. Coercion is 2 and a black. You look at your opponent's hand and you can take any card, including lands. So if you do that turn 1, take away the land that they need to win the game, then you have all the time in the world to cast your Sanitarium Skeleton. If not, you can slow them down or take away a key piece that would screw you up and still have this reoccurring Sanitarium Skeleton, since Orzhov Basilica plus Swamp produces 3 mana. You can block pretty good with that, or keep attacking. There are a bunch of removal spells in this format, so this of course just suffered against the decks that were able to make you discard 3 cards, but when it was a fairer matchup, it did actually perform.
All right, so the next deck list that we have is Smashing Centaur's deck list. Smashing Centaur's deck list, he has 1 Dismal Backwater, 1 Snow-Covered Swamp, 1 Conjurer's Bauble, 1 Stream of Thought, 1 Geth's Verdict. So this deck list is really cool, and it's the deck list that gave us the most trouble.
Yep.
I think Sean has had many sleepless nights thanks to Smashing Centaur's ingenuity.
Okay, so the first 2 decks were actually the decks that gave us the most trouble, and it was the matchup that we had wrong. Smashing actually did make it into the top 8, which made us have to rerun the top 8, and that changed the results. So what happened is, the Smashing Centaur's deck is the 2 lands, 2 ways to recur things, and Geth's Verdict. The first deck list has that Sanitarium Skeleton that they can recur. Each player is dealing a damage to the other player every 3 turns, and I made sure I went through and I broke down every turn on a spreadsheet.
Yeah, okay. So this is also actually one of the matchups that Sean, called me for, and we got onto a little Skype call to talk about it, and we ran through it. And I think the way we ran through it, we didn't go through the entire thing, but we just kind of went through it until we had found that there was just a very discernible pattern to how the game would play out. And then that's when we decided that it was a draw, or that it was a win. It was a win in Vinio at Vinco's favor. That's what we decided,
that's what we decided, because he was able to pull ahead by 1 damage before, while the loop was starting. Right. And so he was dealing his damage first.
Yeah. What What we failed to recognize, however, was that on like turn 52 or something like that.
Turn 56.
Turn 56, Smashing Centaur gets to break the loop because he no longer has to recur. So the way it kind of worked is like he'd have to use Conjurer's Bauble and Stream of Thought would keep the loop going so that eventually he'd get back to the Geth's Verdict, and then he could Geth's Verdict, and then he'd have to go through Conjurer's Bauble and Stream of Thought again to get back to the Geth's Verdict. But then he's actually able to break the loop because he doesn't need to get back the Stream of Thought, because he could just go Geth's Verdict, get back Geth's Verdict instead of Stream of Thought, break the loop, and then cast Geth's Verdict for lethal. And that's where we screwed up, is we didn't play it all the way out till turn 56. We played it out to see that there was a pattern to how it would play out. This is what it would do turn after turn after turn. And Vinio was ahead 1 point every time. We just failed to recognize that, it would be on turn 56, Vinio would be at 2 life, Smashing Centaur would be at 1 life. Smashing Centaur could go like Geth's Verdict in Vinio's combat so he doesn't get attacked for lethal, untap, like crack the Conjurer's Bauble or whatever, draw the Geth's Verdict, and then Geth's Verdict for lethal, instead of needing to go through the repetition of cycling through Stream of Thought, Conjurer's Bauble.
Yeah, and
so that's where we screwed up.
Smashing Centaur wins the game by casting Geth's Verdict one last time on turn 59. It took me... I have a spreadsheet. I'm just going to release that because I think it's kind of cool. That breaks down where every card is, which zone it's in, every turn of the game. And it took me well over an hour to make this. And I had already spent like 45 minutes on this matchup previously.
And then me and Sean spent like another 30 minutes on the matchup.
Yeah,
like,
this one was bad.
I had just like grabbed a pile of... Because like I'm trying to like run through it in my head, and I'm just like, I can't do this. I need to visualize it. And Sean's can write it up on the spreadsheet or whatever and see it. And I'm like, that doesn't work for me. So I eventually just grabbed a Sharpie and a stack of basic lands and wrote the cards and played the games against myself to try and figure out what the heck was going on.
But by the time I asked him, I was just like, I don't know. And I threw up my hands and was just like, figure this out for me. We ran through it. Everything he was doing was right. And then we figured out there was a 1 point lead.
Yeah, the only error that we made was not playing it out till turn 56 or whatever. That was the error that we made. Even though it was a little error, like we did say, it did cost smashing the top 8. That was a big thing. And so that's why we've made the effort to change it and fix it, because that was a really big, skew to the outcome of the match. So
there can't be justice for everyone. Some people aren't going to feel like there's justice for them because we originally told them, like, basically I made that Twitter post that they had won, and we have to recant on that to give justice to somebody else. But anyway.
I do kind of want to make sure that the people who should be rewarded get rewarded for this. And Smashing Centaur definitely put in a lot of work into this deck list. Like, this is a very cool deck, very innovative. Like, somehow, I don't know how, because me personally, I had no idea what was going on in this format. Like, I had no idea what was going to happen. This wasn't something that I could look at and metagame. And somehow Smashing Centaur metagamed it. And that's impressive. So his deck list was pretty next level. So that was Smashing Centaur. That was his deck list. Next deck list, Sap Talks. Swamp, Dark Ritual, Delirium, Skeins, Mesmeric Fiend.
So this is the first one we're coming across that is the strategy that we're looking to get rid of. You basically just play the spells in order. Swamp, Ritual. You have enough mana to cast both your Mesmeric Fiend first, take a non-creature from their hand, and then Delirium Skeins says that both players discard 3 cards. They're down to 1 card. No deck in the world can beat that. So it just flat wins all of its round 1s. And that's not healthy. But this is a brewing competition, so the people who were able to brew up that winning strategy of like, I found the broken thing, let me make the best version of the broken thing, those people were rewarded. So even though there was this the strategy that we don't want to exist, the puzzle of this was still cool to me, that people got to figure this out, and not everybody did.
Yep, and the people who did, they probably all made top 8.
They did.
So yeah, this deck looks really, really powerful. Next deck by Blue 3 Blood, or just Blue Blood, one of the two. Lotus Petal, Lotus Petal, Lotus Petal, Lotus Petal, Gear Seeker Serpent. So the way this works is Gear Seeker Serpent has that cost reduction for all the artifacts you control. So when you put Gear Seeker Serpent on the stack, because you put spells on the stack, then pay their costs, the game is still seeing that there are the 4 Lotus Petals there. Then you sacrifice the Lotus Petals, because those are mana abilities, and you can do that to pay the rest of Gear Seeker Serpent's costs. So you play a turn 1 hexproof, is it 5/6, 5/5?
It's not hexproof, but it is a 5/6.
Oh yeah, I was thinking of the cycling thing for a minute, but yeah, big old 5/6, really hard to deal with.
Enough mana to pay for days if you need to.
Yeah, that's true too. You have an extra mana, right? 1 extra mana. Not great against Guest Verdict.
No, that was like the easiest one of this tournament. I was just like, okay, this and Guest Verdict does 5 damage. Can you kill them by turn 2? No. Okay. 3-0. But I don't have anything else to say here.
I will disclaimer that even though this deck had some rough matchups in its pod, it is my favorite deck, I think, of all the deck lists. It's just really funny.
It is really funny. Did not perform well. It's just playing one single creature I would very much advise against, since people are going to be playing any kind of edicts, bounce spells, counter spells, anyway.
Yeah. Okay, I lied. Blue Bloods was my second favorite deck in the tournament. I forgot about this one. Our next deck list is from Deluxekoff. Island, Lotus Petal, Blighted Agent, Unstable Mutation, Daze.
It did have a kind of a solid strategy against these discard decks of just, I'm going to play out most of my hand before you can do anything. I have an unblockable guy. Pretty good strategy. Just Island, Lotus Petal, Blighted Agent is a 1/1 with Infect that can't be blocked. Unstable Mutation gives your creature +3/+3, which you do have to play the turn after, so the discard does come into effect there. And then Daze to kind of, I would assume, protect your Unstable Mutation, or really any part of it.
All right, our next deck is Redder Tory, Swamp, Golgari Rot Farm, Changeling Outcast, Stinkweed Imp, Grim Harvest.
Like the Changeling Outcast and Grim Harvest, I think this deck has a solid foundation of the Swamp, Golgari Rot Farm, Stinkweed Imp, since every turn you can just dredge that Stinkweed Imp back. That's a really good effect, but the Grim Harvest was kind of easy to lose, and I did like the Changeling Outcast as a 1-drop. I think there are better ones, and little tease here. What I would have put in here was a green 1/1 for 1. That was my favorite creature of the whole tournament. But the Grim Harvest, I was just a little bit meh on. I actually saw some people play, was it Journey to the Netherworld or something like that? Where it has Madness for 0, so your opponent's going to make you discard that, and you discard your other spells, and then as you're discarding that one, you can scoop up, say, your Changeling Outcast. Otherwise, you could just cast it for a single black. I just didn't find the reusability of Grim Harvest to be at all useful.
All right. The next list is by Jaloxo. Mountain, Lotus Petal, Dark Ritual, Burning Inquiry, Liliana Spectre. So this is our first example of the Burning Inquiry deck, which is just, you Lotus Petal, Dark Ritual, cast your Liliana Spectre, play your Mountain, cast Burning Inquiry. You have a threat. Your opponent has 2 cards.
1 card. Because Liliana Spectre's 1, and then Burning Inquiry's 3.
Yep, you're right. Yep.
So this deck, game, turn 1, if you're going first, wins the game. That is not healthy. There was actually more than one person who ran this exact 5-card list. I think it's the better version of the Mesmeric Fiend deck, since you're doing 2 damage per round, and if you're in a racing situation where neither of you, it's profitable for you to block or anything, you just need the bigger creature. I think this is the better deck.
All right, and our last deck list from pod number 1 by Deslavos, Island, Ancient Den, Unsummon, Glinthawk, Core, Skyfisher.
Do you have any thoughts about this before I get into it?
I like what it's trying to do. I think that just unfortunately this format is a little too broken for play a fair 1-drop, play a fair 2-drop. Not even play a fair 2-drop, it's play a fair 3-drop.
Yeah, because you can't actually...
You can't curve that because you got to return the Ancient Den with Glinthawk. Then you need to play the Island, unsummon whatever they did. Then you play your Ancient Den again, Core Skyfisher. So it's trying to get ahead in this race, and I think that this format just wasn't about that, with the presence of Burning Inquiry, Coercion, Delirium Schemes type shenanigans.
Right, and even if it wasn't, I don't like this as a strategy. Like, I just want my creatures to do more than be like an evasive threat that, and these ones aren't even that quick. I did find, like, I don't know, like, First Strike is pretty good. Like, Unsummon can get people that are trying to, like, this just flat out beat the Gearseeker Serpent deck. Just bounce it back to their hand, they can never play it again. But, yeah, I just wasn't very enthused about this, and it didn't perform very well.
All right, Pod 2. MM Rai. Swamp, Golgari Rock Farm, Changeling Outcast, Stinkweed Imp, Grim Harvest. I feel like we've seen this before.
Yeah. And this, I think that with the tournament someone else was running on the Reddit, this was like one of the more prevalent strategies of, play Grim Harvest, Stinkweed Imp. And maybe it works when things are more fair and people are just attacking with creatures and stuff like that. But didn't work here, unfortunately.
Yep. Next deck, Fred McFred, Swamp Forest, Dark Ritual, Coercion, Thallid.
This is my favorite deck list of the entire tournament. You wouldn't... there are so many matchups that this Thallid wins. Like, just alone. Like, if someone casts Burning Inquiry on you, you can still Forest Thallid, and it will win a race against dang near everything. Like, there's like the Errant Ephemeron, the 4/4 with Suspend. Like, there's some Suspend creatures that can beat this. Honestly, most of the Suspend creatures, it beat those too, just because, like, eventually you're going to get more creatures than your opponent, and you can either block with all your tokens, or they attack, you block with one of your tokens, and you can swing in for lethal. Like, it just gives you inevitability. And if you're not familiar with what Thallid does, it's a green 1-mana 1/1 that every turn you put a spore counter on it. When you get to 3 spore counters, you can remove it and make a 1/1 token. So an army in a can in terms of 5-card blind. When it's not just jamming a Thallid turn 1, this deck can Swamp, Ritual, Coercion, and that takes any card out of your opponent's hand, including their land. So if they're only running 1 land, or they have to get to 2 to play their threat, you can either force a draw by either taking their threat or their land, or grabbing something that would kill your Thallid. I really like Coercion as a spell. Like, this deck has 2 modes, like Thallid, I'm gonna race you, or I just win with Coercion, that I found really cool.
Cool. All right, and so our next deck comes from Draft All the Lands.
All caps, 1 word. Draft all the lands.
Which is probably the right strategy if you're playing Cube, so this person is onto something. Mountain, Lotus Petal, Dark Ritual, Burning Inquiry, Liliana's Spectre, the boogeyman of our format.
Yeah, but
Burning Inquiry Liliana Spectre deck.
just it does sound pretty unbeatable. But there's a bigger fish.
There is
Just
one bigger fish. We'll
there's
get there.
one bigger fish.
As Qui-Gon Jinn would say, there's always a bigger fish. Unless you're the biggest fish.
No, there's always a bigger one.
Only a Sith deals in absolutes. All right, our next deck is by Facatello. Island, Dismal Backwater, Rankless Imp, Spell Pierce, and Seal of Removal. So Reckless Imp is 2 in a black for a 2/2 with flying, but it has dash for 1 in a black, which is how Facatello is able to cast it off of Island, Dismal Backwater. Spell Pierce, just a piece of counter magic for anything that's going to interact with your early game. And then Seal of Removal is an enchantment that you sacrifice to unsummon a creature, basically. So I think kind of the strategy with this deck is that you've got a threat that dodges sorcery speed removal with Reckless Imp. You've got a piece of turn 1 disruption with Spell Pierce, and then you've got Seal of Removal. Again, unfortunately, I just don't think this format is really about unsummons, and it's just Spell Pierce probably isn't super great when, I don't know, it's just not in your hand.
I didn't like it. I'd rather see this as a daze, because you can't cast Reckless Imp and have Spell Pierce up. So if there is any instant speed removal, it's getting your creature.
Yeah, you're losing your creatures. So yeah, maybe Spell Pierce becoming a daze. This deck would perform a little better. I don't know. Again, I think it's going to be really difficult with this first tournament because we did kind of drop the ball on the discard rule. And I think that we see a lot better performances from some decks if they're not having to play against the Burning Inquiry Liliana Spectre deck.
Yeah.
So,
and this pod, I feel like, had a lot of that going on.
Yeah. Our next deck from Groove Chicken: Jungle Hallow, Paralyze, Glade Cover Scout.
This one was cool, for sure. It did come out a little bit slow, but I think that was fine since it did have redundant threats, which I found to be really, really good. And then the paralyzes were pretty smart since it is a 1 mana removal spell that if, say, your opponent is playing a Stinkweed Imp, they never get that Stinkweed Imp back.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, Paralyze is a single black mana for an enchantment aura. When it enters the battlefield, tap Enchanted Creature. Enchanted Creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. At the beginning of the upkeep of Enchanted Creature's controller, that player may pay 4. If they do, untap that creature. This is basically Swords to Plowshares with no downside in this format. Like,
yeah.
Nothing, you're never untapping. No one ever has 4 mana. If they did have access to 4 mana repeatably, it probably didn't matter. Like, I don't know. This card, Paralyze is a really good removal spell here. Having 2 Glade Cover Scouts means that you're not losing to their Edict, and it's just going to be really, really hard to kill the other Glade Cover Scouts. So this deck is pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, and one problem is that any 2 toughness creature is going to just stop this in its tracks. Either force a draw or win somehow. But yeah, that's exactly what Paralyze is for. Unfortunately, it just got discarded out of the game.
All right. Our next deck is by Aztunera: Swamp, Vendetta, Vault Scourge, Bone Splitter, Call to the Netherworld.
So this is a deck that's doing something more fair of just like, I'm going to play a Vault Scourge and I'm going to try to race you. Call to the Netherworld actually was really good tech for this meta, where it's going to force you to discard your hand. That's a good chance to cast your Call to the Netherworld and get back your Vault Scourge, so kind of like you're not down so many cards. It still gets rough because you have to deal with their creature and you end up like forcing a draw. But against like the previous deck, the creature just gets paralyzed and they can Vendetta their own creature once, bring it back with Calls of the Netherworld, and then they have a second Paralyze to back that up.
All right. Next deck?
Yeah.
Cool. Moore's Leila Ole. Snow-covered swamp, divest, duress, innocent blood, corpulent corpse. What is corpulent corpse, and does it have anything to do with snow?
No.
Cool. So Moore's was strictly playing the snow-covered swamp for aesthetic. I like it. They have style.
In more than one ways, this gave me headaches. The amount of possibilities that this deck gives when you have divest and duress, and like you just have options upon options. So I had to like make like trees of like, okay, if he does this, then he knows that they're gonna do this, and he does this, and then he does this, and like find out like, okay, if you take this path, we can force a draw. And I had to go through every deck since it's round robin and like figure out what's best. But having all those options, it was pretty good. It didn't get on to the next round, but I think that this is a very good deck list. I mean, you can also like it was semi-resilient to the discard decks. Like if you only made it discard 3, it can still swamp Corpulent Corpse, and I don't think we went over what that does. It's an irrelevant mana cost. You can suspend it for a single black. It's a 3/3 with fear. It does get a little bit awkward when you have to Innocent Blood, and you have to time that. You can't let your opponent wait until your corpse is out, play their creature, force a draw. You have to figure out how to force them using your discard spells to cast their creature, Innocent Blood it, and then go ahead with your corpse.
All right, our next deck list is by Chit3. And I think this is one of the cooler Burning Inquiry deck lists, in my opinion. So we've got Darksteel Citadel, Lotus Petal, Simian Spirit Guide, Wind Zendikon, Burning Inquiry. All right, so Wind Zendikon is a single blue mana for an enchantment aura. You enchant a land. The enchanted land is a 2/2 blue elemental creature with flying. It's still a land. When enchanted land dies, return that card to its owner's hand. That part's not relevant because the land we're putting it on is Darksteel Citadel, which is indestructible. So you play your Citadel, you play your Lotus Petal, you crack it for blue, put Wind Zendikon on it, make an indestructible 2/2, discard Simian Spirit Guide for red, cast Burning Inquiry, cripple your opponent, and now they have to deal with a 2/2 flying indestructible.
Which is a tall order. For anyone beside a Thallid.
Or a Geth's Verdict.
That's true. I think they dodged the Geth's Verdict matchup, though.
Yeah.
Not the Innocent Blood one, though. You know, that previous deck list, they could, like, duress or divest. Either of those is just, like, catastrophic for this deck.
Okay, so Pod 3. First deck list from Rowlick. Swamp, Bloodfell Caves, Innocent Blood, Curse of the Pierced Heart. Again, like, this is one of those decks that, in theory, should be really good. You know, it's got a really hard threat to interact with, Curse, and it has 2 removal spells that are, for the sake of this format, just basically Swords to Plowshares with no downside.
Yeah.
Problem is, again, just the Burning Inquiry menace of our tournament.
But not only that, it was also days. Like, if this only gets up to 2 mana and it has to cast Curse of the Pierced Heart, even if it was against somebody else, not good enough.
Yeah, if it gets dazed. Which, speaking of days, our next deck list by H. Dinley. Island, Errant Ephemeron, Counterspell, Daze. And I think this is our only Counterspell deck in the tournament, right? With the actual Counterspell?
Oh, yeah, with the card actual Counterspell, yes.
There are other counter spells, but not the physical blue counter spell.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that this can actually play it is that Errant Ephemeron is a suspend creature. It's colorless and a blue, and it has suspend 4. It's a 4/4 with flying. So when that creature comes out and they're actually casting it, they have enough mana to pay for that counter spell, which ended up being really, really nice. This deck moved on to the next round.
All right. Our next deck is the Milkman Bot. Geothermal Crevice, Dragon's Breath, Faithless Looting, Ulamog's Crusher, Exhume. This deck is sweet. Unfortunately, going all in on an Ulamog's Crusher isn't a great strategy here. It's got no way to protect it from an Edict at all.
It does have haste, so that if they don't have 3 permanents out, it's just going to blow up all their lands.
Yeah, that's true. Dragon's Breath gives it haste.
It did end up being slow. Like, Geothermal Crevice just was like...
Comes in tapped.
And
Your
then the
second
next
turn
turn...
is Faithless Looting.
Mhm.
Your third turn is Sack, Exhume. No way to play around like Daze, anything like that. So, like, while in theory this deck is really cool, I think it's just got a lot of big holes in it. Daze, Innocent Blood, Burning Inquiry, like all of that stuff. Like, the speed of it, the not inconsistency, but like unresilience. It's not very resilient deck. It's pretty easy to destroy, but very cool.
Very cool.
I love Exhume, Dragon's Breath's Crusher strategies. I think they're really fun.
A part of this tournament, like part of the 5-card blind that I like, is like assemble 5 cards you want to see in your opening hand and would do well like just by themselves as just like a thought experiment. Like, I know that some of these deck lists, like, don't put Thallid in your real decks. It's not going to do much. It just doesn't have enough time. But, like, the Milkman bot putting together a list that we see that actual thing happen in Pauper, and it's just the 5 cards. It could go faster with more.
All right, our next deck comes from Green King Was Here. I was about to say Washery.
That's what I said in my head the whole time I was doing this. So, thank you.
Green King Was Here. Island Slitherblade, Force Spike, Gut Shot.
Don't know why we're not playing Daze. I don't know if, like... Yeah, not sure on that. But if you put Daze in here, you'd get a lot more wins. It didn't do well, but I see what you were going for. And the Gut Shots, unfortunately, just didn't do much. In your whole pod... Most of the creatures had more than 1 toughness, and if they had more than 1, or if they had 1 toughness, it wasn't really like, oh no, a gut shot. Except for this next deck list, gut shots were a thing.
So our next deck comes from Dak v Horror.
I think it's supposed to be an R in there.
Drac v Horror.
Yeah,
okay.
It's Brad.
That makes a lot more sense. Yeah, it's Brad. Winner of our most recent Patreon giveaway. So, shout him out again. Thanks, Brad. All right. Drac v Horror. Sandstone Needle, Paretic Ritual, Immolating Soul Eater, Lightning Bolt, Teamer Battle Rage.
I mean, Immolating Soul Eater is the 1/1 for 2 generic. It's an artifact creature. You can pay Phyrexian Red into it to give it +1/+0. So, you can pump that up big, and you can't pump it up just like that big enough to kill your opponent, but you can get it up to 10 power, and then Teamer Battle Rage if you are under attack, so you don't have enough life. You can also like use some extra mana off of your Sandstone Needle if you haven't sacked it yet, or use that Lightning Bolt. That Lightning Bolt did end up coming in handy in a couple of matchups to just be like, oh sweet, kill your dude. That can either force a draw or pave the way for victory. Did not end up moving on to the next round.
Unfortunately. Next deck list. Kieji Kiriya. Havenwood Battlegrounds, Sulfur Vent, Carrion Feeder, Safehold Elite, Ivy Lane Denizen.
The 2 lands are both sack lands, and one of them can produce black for Carrion Feeder without sacking. The other one, if it can produce, I can't remember, white or green to make the Safehold Elite. And then both of them can sack to make the Ivy Lane Denizen. And that actually produces an infinite combo where the Carrion Feeder just becomes infinitely large. It was really fragile. Either a land was taken from you, or they interacted with your Carrion Feeder. Daze was a thing. It just didn't come together very often. I don't think it ever came together. But infinite combos are cool.
Yeah, it's a pretty sweet deck list. Again, probably one of the deck lists that could maybe have performed better without Burning Inquiries running around. But still, like you said, fairly fragile, not hard to interact with. So
without Burning Inquiry, I think a lot of more people are going to be using Daze and Counterspell. Or even Coercion. When we do another one of these tournaments, probably change your deck list. And I'm trying not to be mean, but I want to say which deck lists didn't perform as well. So I don't want anybody to be offended, and I'm sorry, but it was a competition.
Yeah, And I think that's fine because, all these deck lists are really cool, but it's just kind of the truth of it. Some did worse than others. And, I think it'd be a disservice to people like Kieji if we didn't tell them that because, now they know for the future, back to the drawing board. Let's try to get something better for next time, which, spoilers, we are going to be doing this again. We're not sure when. It's probably not going to be part of a stretch goal or anything. It'll probably just be something that we just do again
As a promotion, yeah.
Yeah, as a promotion, just because it was a lot of fun and we liked it, and we believe everyone else who participated liked it. So next deck list, Agent _of Blight, Bloodfell Caves, Island Days, Diabolic Edict, Curse of the Pierced Heart. I think I really like the days in here over the additional Innocent Blood. I do kind of feel like this Diabolic Edict should just be an Innocent Blood, though.
Yeah, I'll agree with that wholeheartedly. Just like play around days. When this deck did go against somebody with days, the dazes just canceled each other out, and either the other person had a counterspell, and so the Diabolic Edict was gone. I like the Curse of the Pierced Heart strategy. I think you need to be playing a bounce land, but that makes playing days hard.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what the solution is here, but I get it.
I think it's cool too. All right. Next deck, Troke. Island, Lotus Petal, Burning Inquiry, Unsummon, Viscera Deepwalker. What the heck is a Viscera Deepwalker?
It's a suspend creature, as you might have guessed. It is a single blue to suspend. It is a 2/3. Spend 4, and you can pay a blue into it to give it +1/+0 until end of turn. This deck did move on to the next round. One problem that I had with it is that it was outclassed by all of the other suspend creatures. It's only 1 mana, so that it was playing that Burning Inquiry strategy, and that helped it a lot.
All right, and our last deck from the third pod is from Glendalough. It is a mountain, Simian Spirit Guide, Burning Inquiry, Keldon Halberdier. So this person just said Burning Inquiry is the best card in this format. I'm going to play 2.
And boy, did that pay off.
Glendalough did make it to the next round.
Without dropping a match. Yeah, the Keldon Halberdier, it is a single red for a suspend creature, suspend 4. It has first strike. It's a 4/1, so it either outclassed everything or, was protected with the Burning Inquiries. Even if the first Burning Inquiry didn't go off, the second Burning Inquiry went off.
And then if they're just able to get both of them off...
Well, they never will. They have to discard the second one to the first one.
Oh, you're right.
But it was just there, to be like, oh, maybe someone will run Counterspell or Coercion. Yeah, and I just want that to happen a lot, and it worked. Anyway.
Keldon Halberdier is a 4/1 with first strike and suspend for a red. Suspend 4, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so that's what that is. So that was Glendalogh's deck, and that's the end of the round robin. Those are the 3 pods. All right, so those were all the deck lists. Now we're going to get into the top 8. I'm just going to go through and name all the people who made the top 8 in, I guess, descending order from 8th place to 1st place. And then Sean's going to go back, and we're just going to kind of talk about each deck list. And then Sean's also going to kind of recap what happened in the top 8, how the matches went, etc. So 8th place with 2 points in the top 8 is H. Dinley. 7th place with 6 points is Chid 3. 6th place with 7 points is Fred McFred. And 5th place with 7 points is Trock. 4th place with 9 points is Draft All the Lands. 3rd place with 9 points is Jaloxo. 2nd place with 12 points is Glendalough. And 1st place with 17 points is Smashing Centaur.
Yeah, so Smashing Centaur, we didn't have in the top 8, and we got an email that was like, actually, I was supposed to win the entire tournament, and I was like, freaking yeah, right. Like, I work customer service. I'm familiar with people calling in and being like, actually, I'm supposed to have $1,000 credit on my account. And I'm like, okay, let's talk this out. I was so ready to just be like, nah. But he was right. I can admit when I'm wrong, and woof. From nothing to first place. That's why we had to go back. Like, if it was like, okay, you missed out on $15 or something store credit, I might have just been like, I'm just gonna throw out an extra $15. I don't really care that much. Sorry about your glory, but it's bigger than that.
Yeah, Smashing Centaur won the entire tournament, and we felt like that needed to be recognized and rewarded. So that's why we went back and fixed everything. Let's just get into these deck lists and sort of how the matchups went. We'll talk about some of the things that were notable.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously we've talked about it throughout this podcast, but the Burning Inquiry and the what was it? Is that the card? Burning Inquiry.
Yeah, and then Burning random other stuff.
Yeah, the Burning Inquiry decks were just sort of the boogeyman of this tournament, and Smashing Centaur's deck just couldn't lose to those.
Yeah, we'll get to that when we get to first place. I do want to go like reverse order. Let's go 8th, and I just want to say how that deck did and why it was at the point total it was at. So H. Dinley had the deck Island, Errant Ephemeron, Counterspell Daze. Burning Inquiry does shut down these counterspell decks. They made it so they had to choose between having to land or having their spells if the other person went first, and even if they dazed a lot of their opponents, it just wasn't enough. Like, just losing that first match made it so the best that they could do was draw a lot of these. Next is Chid 3. It ended up being a worse version of a lot of these decks. It didn't make them discard more than 3 cards, and so it did end up like it did okay with 6 points. It got a single win against H. Dinley, and then the rest it got its points in draws. Because it was winning the first match and then losing the one where the other person went first. Fred McFred with my favorite deck list of Swamp Forest, Dark Ritual, Coercion, and Thalid. I know you're tied with the next person. We did just do a random number generator to choose where you were. That's how the rules are. If it's a draw, we don't do anything special. It's just we randomly choose somebody and we end the tournament. There's enough work that goes into this thing. The Coercion just didn't measure up to the Burning Inquiries and things. It was able to do a little bit better than the Counterspell deck, but again, it ended up drawing a lot of the matches, and it won a single match against Trock's deck list, which was the Viscera Deepwalker Unsummoned deck. The Unsummoned just didn't end up being that impactful. And of course the Thalid could race the Viscerid. 5th place is Trock with Island, Lotus Petal, Burning Inquiry, Unsummoned, Viscera Deepwalker. Just won a single match against Chid 3 and drew all the rest of its matches. In 4th place with 9 points, we have Draft All the Lands. They shared a deck list with Jalaxo. This was the deck capable of making your opponent discard 4 cards if it went first. These did really well. The threat did get outclassed by Glendalock's Keldon Halberdier, but other than that, it was pretty similar. Glendalock, I think we originally had Glendalock winning. I'm sorry. They used 2 Burning Inquiries, so if they did get in a counterspell matchup, something didn't work out right with the Burning Inquiry, like it got coercioned away or something like that, they had a backup, so I think they made better use than most anybody else of what we thought was the best strategy of making your opponent discard their hand, and that Keldon Halberdier, if it got in a race, it could win those races, especially since pretty much nothing could block it since it has first strike. And then finally, Smashing Centaur, like we've spoken about, next leveled the entire top 8 and just knocked it out of the park. The only matchups that they really didn't all out win, they drew because their opponent made them discard 4 cards, and then when they went, they were able to rebuild because they were able to play their spells that shuffled cards back in. Like they'd play the Bauble turn 1, and then they were able to bring back one of their other key spells that let them keep going. Anyway, I'm not redoing this episode. Don't email me. Do you want to go through the prizes, or do you have any input on
let's go through the prizes. Let everyone know what they've won. So, first place to Smashing Centaur, they will be rewarded with a $100 gift certificate, I guess, to mtgotraders.com. That's what all this is. This is all basically store credit for MTGO traders in the form of coupon codes. Yeah. So Smashing Centaur will be receiving $100. Glendalock will be receiving $50. Third and fourth place to Jalaxo and Draft All the Lands. They'll get $35 apiece. Fifth and sixth place, which is Trock and Fred McFred, they'll receive $25. And then seventh and eighth place for Chid 3 and H. Denley, they'll each receive $15 in store credit. So
that is really like, okay, there's a little bit of justice in the world. The tie breaks didn't matter. Whether you got third or fourth place, it didn't matter because you both got $35, and then the 2 point people with 7 points both got.
Third is better than fourth, so it matters because of the prestige.
I feel like we're putting a lot of stock in the prestige of this thing. But that's basically it, and I hope to be doing one of these soon. That's weird to say after I put all these hours into it, but the whole point of this is we modify the ban list, we modify the rules, and we run it again, and it's another deck brewing challenge. For the people that... there's nobody that submitted after the due date, but the people that were like, I'm going to think up a deck list and send it in like later, and then they just forgot, please join in next time. Like, I know it's more work for me, but I want 200 people to be doing one of these tournaments. I think that would be amazing.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I was really excited about the amount of participation that we had and the buzz around it with some members of the pauper community. Just remember, you can only submit one deck list.
Yeah.
Don't think that you can fool us with your 3 Magic Online usernames. We have our ways, and we'll find out. And then you'll just be removed from the entire tournament. So, disclaimer to the person that did this, and a warning for everyone in the future. Yeah. Sean is way too clever for that. He doesn't fall for your bull crap.
I'm not that clever. It was... I don't want to talk about it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're not going to go into details except to scare anyone out of trying it again.
This person, though, I almost was just like, I'm going to choose one of your deck lists at random. But then I didn't think it was fair because, that is against the rules. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm not sorry. You don't get a game this system.
But if you do decide to like, I want to send in a deck list, and then, in the future when we do this again, and you want to like, I want to modify my deck list, you just send in the second deck list and I just write over the other one.
Yeah, with a little note like, hey, I want this to be my new deck list, this.
There were a few people that actually did that, and that was like
totally fine.
An hour after we announced this, someone was like, 4 Lotus Petals and an Empty the Warrens, and I was just like,
read the rules, man.
I didn't even have to say anything, and he was just like, oh, sorry. Like
4 Lotus Petals and an Empty the Warrens. This was easy. How did no one think of that?
Got him.
Well, we did. It's banned.
Hey, guess what? You got your 4 Lotus Petals and your Empty the Warrens? Burning Inquiry. Gotcha.
Got him. Yeah, that'll be the one thing. Next time, we're going to follow that rule that you can't make your opponent discard more than 1 card, or whatever that rule is.
So I was just going to say...
Burning Inquiry mess.
I don't want to do it. I still don't. I'm just like, let's get rid of the decks that let's get rid of the cards that make you discard 3 cards, like Burning Inquiry and Delirium Skeins. And even if it's like a Hymn to Turok, I don't know if I mind. Like, if you...
That's what you said.
I know.
This is what happened.
Okay. Well, I guarantee the next time there's going to be 10 people that submit a list that looks like Dismal Backwater, Snow-Covered Swamp, Conjurer's Bauble, Stream of Thought, and Geth's Verdict. Like, there's already like a deck that, bam, this guy beats it. This is going to be there. We're not banning anything out of this deck. Like, you got to be prepared for this deck now. Are you going to play Relic? I don't know.
Oh, gosh. Oh, I don't even want to think about it.
End times.
All right, well, that's the show. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Common Knowledge. Again, big thank you to all of our great sponsors at inkgaming.com and GameGrid Midvale. Check out their online store in the link below, and don't forget about that coupon code CCMTG10, good for a 10% discount on all Ink Gaming supplies and accessories. You can find the show on puremtgo.com, as well as the Constructed Criticism YouTube channel. You can also send us an email if you'd like to at commonknowledgemtg@gmail.com. We love your emails. We love reading them. You can find the show on Twitter at CKPodcastMTG, as well as our ever-growing Facebook group, Common Knowledge. And Sean, where can the listeners find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Lobbert8, that is Lobbert and the number 8, as well as YouTube. You can find me if you just search for Lobbert. I have videos of me playing Pauper, usually Pauper Leagues there, so check that out.
Boom, and you can find me also on Twitter at bclark_CK. Thank you so much for listening, and see you next time.
Bye.
Bye forever.